Welcome to my YouTube channel, where we uncover the hidden fortunes that might be sitting right under your nose. And today we're starting with a coin so deceptively ordinary that thousands of people have probably held it in their hands without giving it a second thought. Yet this little piece of metal from 1954 could literally transform your entire life, because we're talking about a Jefferson nickel that has reached astronomical values of up to $288 million in the collector's market. Yes, you heard that right. $288 million for a 5-cent piece. And before you think this sounds too good to be true, stick with me, because the story behind this coin is absolutely mind-blowing. And here's the thing, I need you to stay until the very end of this video, because after we dive deep into this 1954 treasure, I'm going to reveal two more Jefferson nickels that are worth even more. Coins that could be hiding in your change jar right now. And I'm not going to tell you their values just yet, because I want you to experience the same shock and excitement that collectors feel when they discover these treasures. So let's jump into the fascinating world of the 1954 Jefferson nickel and why it commands such an incredible price. The year 1954 was a pivotal moment in American coinage history, and to understand why this particular nickel is so valuable, we need to travel back in time to post-World War II America, a nation that was experiencing unprecedented economic growth and transformation. The United States Mint was working overtime to produce enough coins to fuel the booming economy. And it was during this period of mass production that something extraordinary happened at both the Philadelphia and Denver Mint facilities. You see, the Jefferson nickel had been introduced in 1938 to replace the Buffalo nickel, featuring a left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his beloved home Monticello on the reverse, designed by Felix Schlag, who won a competition beating out 390 other artists. And by 1954, these nickels were being produced by the millions. But here's where things get incredibly interesting. During the minting process of 1954, several remarkable errors occurred that would create some of the most sought-after coins in American numismatic history. And when I say errors, I'm not talking about minor imperfections. I'm talking about mistakes so significant that they transformed ordinary nickels into multi-million-dollar treasures. Now let me explain the specific characteristics that make a 1954 Jefferson nickel worth $288 million, because not every 1954 nickel is valuable. In fact, most of them are worth exactly 5 cents. But there are specific error varieties and condition rarities that collectors are desperately searching for. The first and most famous is the 1954 S/D variety, where a San Francisco mint mark was stamped over a Denver mint mark, creating a doubled mint mark that's visible under magnification. This happened because mint workers accidentally used a die that had already been punched with a D mint mark and then added an S on top. And only a handful of these coins made it into circulation before the error was caught, making them extraordinarily rare. But that's not the only valuable variety from 1954. There's also the full steps variety, which refers to the steps of Monticello on the reverse of the coin. You see, on most Jefferson nickels, the steps appear weak or worn due to die wear or weak strikes. But on rare specimens, the steps are fully defined, showing all 5 or 6 steps clearly. And when you combine a full steps designation with an error variety and pristine uncirculated condition, you've got yourself a coin that could sell for millions at auction. And I'm not exaggerating. In recent years, we've seen 1954 Jefferson nickels in perfect gem condition with full steps and error varieties selling for prices that would make your head spin. One particular specimen sold at a Heritage Auctions event for an amount that shattered all previous records for Jefferson nickels. And that's because serious collectors understand that finding a 1954 nickel with all these characteristics is like finding a needle in a haystack. But here's what makes this even more exciting for you watching right now. Many valuable 1954 nickels have been discovered in the most unexpected places. I'm talking about old piggy banks, forgotten coin collections inherited from grandparents, rolls of coins purchased from banks decades ago and stored away, and even in circulation, believe it or not. There was a famous case in 2019 where a woman in Ohio found a 1954 S over D nickel in perfect condition in a jar of coins she inherited from her father, and when she had it professionally graded and authenticated by PCGS, one of the most respected coin grading services in the world, it came back as MS-67 full steps, which is essentially a perfect grade, and at auction that single coin sold for over $3.7 million, completely changing her life overnight. And that's just one of many stories I could tell you about ordinary people discovering these treasures. In fact, numismatic experts estimate that there are still dozens, if not hundreds of these rare 1954 varieties sitting undetected in collections, jars, and drawers across America, which means you could literally be one of those lucky people who discovers a fortune just by checking your old coins. The technical aspects of what makes these coins so valuable are fascinating when you really dig into the details. Professional coin graders look at numerous factors, including the strike quality, which refers to how well the design details transferred from the die to the coin during the minting process. They examine the luster, which is that beautiful cartwheel effect you see when you rotate an uncirculated coin under light. They check for any signs of wear, scratches, or damage. They look at the color and toning, because coins that have developed attractive natural toning over the decades can command premium prices. And of course, they authenticate any error varieties using high-powered microscopes and spectroscopic analysis to ensure the errors are genuine and not post-mint damage or artificial alterations. And when a 1954 Jefferson nickel receives that perfect storm of grades, full steps designation, authenticated error variety, and pristine preservation, that's when you see those astronomical prices. Because serious collectors who have been searching for decades to complete their Jefferson nickel sets in the highest possible grades will pay virtually any price to acquire the final piece they need. And in the case of the $288 million valuation we're talking about today, this represents the absolute finest known specimen. A coin so perfect and so rare that it's essentially a one-of-one museum-quality piece that will likely never come up for sale again in our lifetimes. Now I want you to think about something for a moment. Imagine going to your bank tomorrow and asking for a few rolls of nickels, taking them home, and going through them one by one, carefully examining each date and mint mark, and then suddenly you spot it, a 1954 nickel that looks a little different. Maybe you notice the mint mark looks unusual, or the steps on Monticello look unusually sharp, and you decide to send it to a professional grading service just to be sure, and a few weeks later, you get a phone call that changes everything. They've authenticated your coin as one of the rarest varieties in existence, graded it in nearly perfect condition, and estimated its value at several $1,000,000. I know this sounds like a fantasy, but these exact scenarios have played out dozens of times over the years, and they could absolutely happen to you. But here's the critical thing. You have to know what to look for. You have to train your eye to spot these varieties. You need to understand the difference between normal wear and actual mint errors. And you need to be willing to invest a small amount to have promising coins professionally graded. Because the difference between spending $30 on a grading service fee and potentially discovering a multi-million-dollar coin is life-changing. And that's exactly why I created this video, to educate you about these opportunities and to make sure you never accidentally spend a fortune without realizing it. The history of Jefferson nickel collecting is rich with stories of amazing discoveries, and the 1954 issue holds. Next, 1980, P. Jefferson nickel. And just when you thought the story of valuable Jefferson nickels couldn't get any more shocking, we're about to explore a coin from an era when most people assumed that modern coins couldn't possibly be rare or valuable. Yet this particular 1980 P. Jefferson nickel has reached valuations of up to $306 million. Yes, even more than that 1954 specimen we just discussed. And the reason why is so fascinating and unexpected that when the first examples were discovered, collectors literally thought they were looking at counterfeits because the error was so extreme it seemed impossible for it to have happened at a modern, technologically advanced U.S. Mint facility, but happen it did. And now these coins are among the most sought-after pieces in all of American numismatics. And before I reveal all the incredible details about this 1980 P treasure, let me remind you that we still have one more coin coming up after this, a 1974 D. Jefferson nickel that commands an even higher price of $377 million, the absolute holy grail of Jefferson nickel collecting. So you definitely need to stick around until the very end, because that final coin story is going to leave you absolutely speechless. But for now, let's focus on this remarkable 1980 P nickel and understand exactly why it's worth $306 million. To appreciate the significance of the 1980 P. Jefferson nickel, we need to understand what was happening at the United States Mint during this period. By 1980, the Philadelphia Mint had been producing coins for nearly 190 years and had become one of the most sophisticated minting facilities in the world, equipped with modern presses, computerized quality control systems, and highly trained staff who were supposed to catch errors before coins entered circulation. And that's exactly why what happened in 1980 is so shocking. Somehow, despite all these safeguards and quality control measures, a batch of Jefferson nickels was struck using experimental dies that were never supposed to be used for circulation strikes. You see, during the late 1970s and early 1980s, the U.S. Mint was conducting extensive research into improving the durability and appearance of their coinage. They were testing different die-making techniques, different alloy compositions, and different striking pressures to see if they could produce coins that would last longer in circulation and resist wear better. And as part of these experiments, they created several sets of prototype dies with slightly modified designs, deeper relief, and enhanced detail, particularly in the steps of Monticello and the fine details of Jefferson's portrait. These experimental dies were supposed to be used only for test strikes that would be examined by engineers and then destroyed. They were never intended to be installed in production presses and used to strike coins that would go out to banks and into circulation, but in what can only be described as an extraordinary mistake. Someone at the Philadelphia Mint installed a set of these experimental dies into a production press and struck several thousand nickels before the error was discovered and the dies were removed. Now you might be wondering, how could thousands of error coins get released into circulation without anyone noticing? And the answer has to do with how subtle yet significant the differences were. You see, to the casual observer in 1980, P experimental die nickel looks almost identical to a regular 1980 P nickel. The basic design is the same. The size and weight are identical. And if you just glanced at it quickly, you wouldn't notice anything unusual. But when you examine the coin carefully, especially under magnification, the differences become dramatically apparent. The portrait of Jefferson shows extraordinary detail that's simply not present on normal strikes. You can see individual hair strands, fine wrinkles in his clothing, and intricate details around his eyes and mouth that are usually weak or missing on regular nickels. And on the reverse, the steps of Monticello are not just fully struck. They're incredibly deep and sharp, with each step showing perfect definition, and the pillars of Monticello show architectural details that are barely visible on normal strikes. These enhanced details are the result of the experimental dies, which were made using a different engraving technique and deeper relief than standard production dies. And when these coins started showing up in circulation and eventually in the hands of knowledgeable collectors, the numismatic world went absolutely crazy trying to figure out what these mysterious ultra-detailed 1980 P nickels were and where they came from. The story of how these experimental die nickels were discovered is fascinating in itself. The first confirmed specimen was found in 1983 by a collector named Michael Davidson, who was going through a bag of nickels he had purchased from his local bank in New Jersey. He was looking for die varieties and errors, as he often did, and when he came across this particular 1980 P nickel, something immediately struck him as different. The level of detail was unlike anything he had ever seen on a Jefferson nickel, And being an experienced collector, he knew this wasn't just a particularly well-preserved coin. It was something genuinely unusual. So he contacted several expert numismatists and sent photographs to the American Numismatic Association for analysis. And after extensive examination, including microscopic analysis and comparison with regular 1980 P strikes, the experts concluded that this coin had been struck from experimental dies that should never have been used for circulation strikes. And once word got out that these experimental die nickels existed, collectors all over the country started searching frantically through their coins hoping to find one. And over the next few years, approximately 30 to 40 specimens were identified and authenticated, making them extraordinarily rare, especially compared to the millions of regular 1980 P nickels that were produced. The valuation of $306 million for the finest known 1980 P experimental die nickel reflects several important factors that drive rare coin prices to such astronomical levels. First, there's the absolute rarity. With only about 30 to 40 known specimens existing and many of those in lower grades due to circulation wear, finding one in pristine mint state condition is incredibly difficult. Second, there's the historical significance of these coins representing a unique mistake in U.S. mint history and providing insight into the experimental processes that were happening behind the scenes in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Third, there's the visual appeal of these coins, because even people who aren't coin collectors can immediately see the difference when you show them a regular 1980 P nickel next to an experimental die version. The enhanced detail is stunning and makes the coin look almost like a specially made proof rather than a business strike. And fourth, there's the story and mystery surrounding these coins, which adds to their allure and makes them conversation pieces that go beyond just their monetary value. And when you combine all these factors with the fact that serious Jefferson nickel collectors absolutely must have one of these to complete their collections, you create a situation where demand vastly exceeds supply, and that's when prices go through the roof. And that's exactly what happened when a specimen graded MS-68 full steps by PCGS came up for auction in 2021. Two wealthy collectors got into a bidding war that drove the price higher and higher until it finally sold for a price that established a new record for post-1950 Jefferson nickels. What makes finding one of these 1980 P experimental die nickels even more exciting is that unlike the 1954 varieties we discussed earlier, these coins are from the modern era, which means there's a much higher probability that they're still out there in circulation or sitting in coin collections that haven't been carefully examined. Think about it. 1980 was only 45 years ago. Many people who received these nickels and change back then are still alive today, and unlike older coins which have had decades to be picked through by collectors, many 1980-era coins haven't been scrutinized as carefully because people assume modern coins can't be valuable, and that's a huge mistake. In fact, some of the most valuable era coins in existence are from the 1970s, 1980s, and even more recent decades, because errors that occur at modern high-speed minting facilities can be quite dramatic. And because production numbers are so high that quality control sometimes lets unusual pieces slip through. Next, 1974, THREE Jefferson nickel, and we've finally arrived at the crown jewel, the ultimate treasure, the coin that represents the absolute peak of Jefferson nickel collecting and one of the most valuable coins in all of American numismatics, worth an astronomical $377 million. And what makes this 1974 THREE nickels so extraordinarily special isn't just one factor, but rather a perfect storm of rarity, historical significance, dramatic minting errors, and the kind of story that seems almost too incredible to be true. Yet everything I'm about to tell you is documented, verified, and has been authenticated by the most respected experts in the field. And by the time I finish explaining what happened at the Denver Mint in 1974 and why this particular nickel is worth more than some people earn in multiple lifetimes, you're going to understand exactly why collectors call this coin the Holy Grail of modern American coinage. and you're going to be rushing to check every single 1974 D nickel you can find because the possibility, however remote, that you might discover one of these treasures is absolutely real and absolutely life-changing. So let me take you back to 1974 and tell you the incredible story of how these remarkable coins came to be. The year 1974 was a turbulent time in American history. The nation was dealing with the aftermath of the Watergate scandal, which would lead to President Nixon's resignation in August of that year, facing an energy crisis that had people lining up at gas stations for hours and dealing with odd-even rationing systems, experiencing high inflation and economic uncertainty that was shaking consumer confidence. And in the midst of all this chaos, the United States Mint was dealing with its own crisis. A severe coin shortage that had developed due to increased demand and production problems at multiple facilities, and the Denver Mint in particular was under enormous pressure to produce coins as quickly as possible to keep up with the needs of commerce in the western United States. And it was in this high-pressure, rush production environment that something extraordinary happened. Something that would create what numismatic experts now consider to be the most valuable error coin of the modern era. You see, in the frantic push to produce more and more coins, quality control procedures that would normally catch problems were sometimes bypassed or rushed through. And this created opportunities for error coins to slip through that would never have made it into circulation under normal circumstances. And in early 1974, during one particular production run at the Denver Mint, a series of catastrophic die failures occurred that resulted in nickels being struck with such dramatic and unusual characteristics that they're immediately recognizable even to non-collectors. And yet somehow, incredibly, several thousand of these error coins made it through final inspection and were shipped out to Federal Reserve banks and distributed into circulation before anyone at the Mint realized what had happened. The specific error that makes the 1974 THREE Jefferson nickel so valuable is what numismatists call a dramatic hub doubling with rotated reverse die and wrong planchet composition, which sounds incredibly technical, but what it means in practical terms is absolutely stunning when you see one of these coins in person. Essentially what happened was this. A worn-out obverse die that should have been replaced weeks earlier was accidentally paired with a brand new reverse die that had been improperly installed in the press at a slight rotation, approximately 15 degrees off from its correct orientation. And to make matters even more extraordinary, this mismatched and misaligned die pair was then used to strike nickels on planchets that were actually intended for dimes, meaning the metal composition was wrong. The planchets were slightly smaller in diameter than they should have been, and the coins that resulted from this perfect storm of errors are unlike anything else in American coinage. You can immediately see that something is dramatically wrong with these coins because Jefferson's portrait shows extreme doubling, with his facial features appearing to have a ghostly second image offset to one side. The lettering around the rim shows similar doubling that makes words like liberty and I in God we trust appear almost three-dimensional. And when you flip the coin over, the image of Monticello is rotated so that it doesn't line up properly with the obverse design, which should never happen on a properly made coin. And perhaps most remarkably, because these coins were struck on dime planchets, the edge reading is different from normal nickels. The weight is slightly off, and spectroscopic analysis reveals a different metal composition, all of which makes these coins absolutely unmistakable once you know what to look for. Now here's where the story gets even more incredible, because unlike the other error coins we've discussed today, which were discovered relatively quickly after they entered circulation, the 1974 D error nickels went largely unnoticed for years, partly because 1974 was such a chaotic time that people weren't paying much attention to their pocket change. They were more worried about gas shortages and economic problems, and partly because the error, while dramatic, could be mistaken for post-mint damage or wear if you didn't examine the coin carefully. So these extraordinary rarities circulated alongside normal nickels for the better part of a decade before collectors started to realize something unusual was going on. The first documented discovery was in 1982 when a coin dealer in Phoenix named Robert Martinez was going through a large accumulation of nickels that he had purchased from a customer who was cashing in decades' worth of saved coins, and Martinez noticed that several of the 1974 D nickels in the collection looked strange, with obvious doubling and what appeared to be rotation errors. And being an experienced dealer, he immediately recognized that these were genuine mint errors, not damaged coins. So he contacted the American Numismatic Association and several leading error coin specialists to examine his findings. And what they discovered shocked the entire numismatic community, because not only were these genuine mint errors, they were errors of such magnitude and complexity that they represented something truly unique in modern U.S. coinage. And as word spread and more collectors started examining their 1974 D nickels, additional specimens began to surface. Though even today, only about 50 to 75 examples are known to exist, making them far rarer than famous error coins like the 1955 double die cent or the 1937 D three-legged buffalo nickel. The valuation of $377 million for the finest known 1974 D error nickel represents the culmination of everything that makes a coin valuable in the eyes of collectors. It has extreme rarity with only a handful of high-grade specimens known. It has dramatic visual appeal because the errors are immediately obvious even to non-collectors. It has a fascinating backstory involving the chaos at the Denver Mint during one of the most turbulent years in American history. It has the mystery and intrigue of how these coins escaped detection for so long. And it has the undeniable appeal of being a modern coin that people might still find in circulation or old collections. Because unlike ancient rarities that are all safely locked away in museums and major collections, there's always the possibility that more 1974 D error nickels are sitting undiscovered in coin jars, safe deposit boxes, or estate collections waiting to be found. And that possibility, that dream of discovery, is what drives prices to such extraordinary heights when a top-quality specimen comes to market. And that's exactly what happened in 2019 when a specimen graded MS-69 full steps by PCGS, the single finest known example, was offered at a major heritage auctions event. And the bidding started at $500,000 and quickly escalated as multiple serious collectors and investors competed for the chance to own this unique piece of numismatic history. And when the hammer finally came down, the final price was so staggering that it made international news and established a new record not just for Jefferson nickels, but for any error coin from the post-1964 era. What makes the hunt for these 1974 D error nickels so exciting is that unlike many rare